Welcome, dreamers, to another journey through time's hidden corridors. I am your guide through the dreaming historian, where ancient mysteries whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Tonight, we venture into the shadowed stone of a forgotten stronghold, where the wind speaks of vanished brotherhoods and secrets locked away beneath centuries of silence. This is the story of a medieval castle that holds a 1,000-year secret, a tale entwined with the enigmatic legacy of the Knights Templar. Before we embark on this mystical journey, if these whispers from the past resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing for more nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let our global community of mystery seekers connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now settle into comfort, close your eyes, and let the ancient voices guide you into peaceful contemplation. The moon hangs low over the hills of Languedoc, casting silver light across crumbling ramparts and silent towers. Ivy coils along ancient walls, and the scent of moss and aged stone fills the air. This is no ordinary ruin. Beneath its weathered facade sleeps a secret that has endured the turning of 1,000 years. The castle, nameless on modern maps and avoided by the villagers nearby, was once a sanctuary of the most enigmatic order in medieval Christendom, the Knights Templar. It is said that when night falls and fog coils in from the valleys, one can hear faint echoes from beneath the ground, the distant clang of steel, the low chant of forgotten rites, the creak of oaken doors long since sealed. Locals speak of the place in hushed tones. They call it La Forteresse, sans Nam, the fortress without a name. Some say the Templars left behind something far greater than gold. Tonight, we begin our descent into that mystery. In the year 1119, a group of 9 knights formed an order under the blazing sun of Jerusalem, sworn to protect pilgrims and uphold sacred vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These men became known as the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar. Over time, their influence stretched from the sands of the Holy Land to the farthest reaches of Europe. They built fortresses, commanderies, and outposts in lands both hostile and serene. One such outpost rose in the wild heart of Occitania, not far from the winding roads of Carcassonne, strategically placed between pilgrimage routes and secretive mountain passes. The castle was both a spiritual retreat and a military outpost, yet it was built not merely for war, but for something else entirely. Beneath its great hall lay an underground chamber carved with symbols no local stonemason could decipher. Spirals, suns, labyrinths, and crosses that never saw the light of Roman churches. When the Templars built, they built in silence. No records remain of this castle's construction. No architect's name was ever etched into stone, but a single parchment survives. Housed in the library of the Vatican, its ink faded and its script nearly illegible. It speaks of a Domus Sancti Ignoti, a house of the unknown saint, buried beneath a keep, accessible only during the solstice when the sun strikes the western wall just so. Whether the unknown saint ever lived, no one can say. But the implications of the phrase are clear. This castle held a spiritual mystery, one so sacred or dangerous that it warranted silence even among those sworn to secrecy. Centuries passed. The Templars thrived. They became bankers, landholders, and feared warriors. Yet whispers of their spiritual pursuits never ceased. Alchemical treatises, fragments of the Hermetica, and even Coptic scrolls were said to pass through their hands. In Languedoc, where Cathars once preached dualism and divine knowledge hidden from the masses, the Templars found a sympathetic soil for such thought. And so, within this castle's hidden crypt, they may have hidden more than wealth, a relic, a manuscript, or perhaps the bones of one whose teachings defied the church, a prophet erased from memory, entombed not in stone, but in sacred secrecy. What we know is this. In 1307, the Templar order was betrayed. King Philip IV of France, hungry for their gold and threatened by their independence, ordered mass arrests. Across the country, Templar strongholds were seized, but not this one. When royal men-at-arms arrived, they found nothing. No knights, no horses, no treasure, only silence. The castle had emptied itself in the night, as if swallowed by the fog. A legend grew, that the last Templars of Occitania had vanished into the earth, taking with them a great secret. Those who returned later claimed that, during the harvest moon, when shadows are long and the wind stands still, faint lights can be seen flickering deep within the castle's bowels, as if torches still burned beneath the stones. Some say the Templars built a labyrinth beneath the keep, a chamber that only opens to those who carry the seal of the Silent Brotherhood, Others claim that the entire hill was hollowed out, the castle merely a capstone upon a great subterranean chapel where rituals were performed in languages older than Latin. More tantalizing still are the maps. In 1894, a young archaeologist named Émile Duret discovered a strange parchment in the archives of Toulouse. It bore a design resembling the castle in question, marked not with names, but with sigils. A compass rose without directions, stars in strange configurations, and a crescent cradling an eye. When Émile traveled to the ruin to investigate, he never returned. The locals say his lantern was seen flickering through the fog for 3 nights, moving from tower to tower though no soul was there. Then, the light vanished. His journal, found abandoned at the inn, spoke of descending stairs carved into the bedrock, symbols that seemed to pulse with warmth, and a whispering sound that grew louder the deeper he went. Skeptics dismissed the story. They say Émile was lost to the elements, or madness. But others, those who still light candles for the unnamed saint, believe he found the chamber, and that the chamber found him. The castle has stood empty for centuries. It leans now, tired and forgotten, yet untouched by time's usual cruelty. Trees do not overtake it. Moss stops shy of certain stones. Birds do not nest in its towers, as if the structure itself resists decay, holding vigil for something beneath. So what lies below? Is it merely myth, or do ancient stones hold memory? Can walls built with ritual and reverence carry echoes long after their builders are dust? We begin here, with the castle in the mist, because every journey into mystery requires a threshold, and this threshold is old, patient, and waiting. Let us cross it together. Beneath the heavy silence of the ruined keep, stones hold memories that no parchment could ever capture. The floor of the great hall, once polished by the boots of armored men and the soft tread of silent monks, is now covered in dust and scattered with brittle leaves. Yet if you listen, truly listen, you might still hear it, the faint cadence of footsteps long ceased, echoing against walls as if time itself loops in gentle repetition. Stone remembers. It remembers the chants whispered during dawn rituals, when sunlight filtered through narrow slit windows and cast long golden blades upon the flagstones. It remembers the clinking of goblets raised in Silent Brotherhood, not in revelry but in sacred commitment. It remembers the weight of secrets, whispered not in words, but encoded in geometry, ritual, and silence. Scholars have long puzzled over Templar architecture, and rightly so. Their fortresses were not constructed merely for defense. Unlike the extravagant castles of secular lords, the Templar designs were austere, yet profoundly mathematical. Proportions rooted in sacred geometry. Hidden chambers whose resonance matched Gregorian chants in certain frequencies. Spiraling staircases that always turned clockwise. A symbol, some believe, of ascension toward light. In this particular castle, long abandoned by records and untouched by tour guides, the architecture tells its own story. A visiting architect from Avignon in 1782, curious about rumors of strange acoustics, documented a curious phenomenon when one speaks in the northwest tower. The sound carries into the far eastern crypt without any known tunnel or opening. A whisper in one part of the castle could travel perfectly clear to another, as if the building itself was designed to eavesdrop on the thoughts of its inhabitants. But more curious still were the carvings, hidden along the inner face of the keep's southern wall. Just below the broken remnants of a stained glass window is an etching the size of a child's palm. It resembles a sunburst at first, but closer inspection reveals concentric circles, 12 of them, interwoven by triangular paths. At the center, a stylized cross without arms. Beneath it, in a script no longer spoken, a single word, lux, light. The villagers believe that the castle's stones glow during the equinox, not visibly, but beneath the surface, as if absorbing something from the alignment of sun and sky. The phenomenon is unrecorded in any scientific literature, and yet multiple oral traditions whisper the same tale, that on one particular night each spring and autumn, the castle breathes. It was on one such night that a wandering Benedictine monk named Brother Émile claimed to have seen the ghost of a knight standing upon the battlements. In his tattered journal, preserved in a convent attic, he wrote, "He stood in silence, unmoving, robed in white, and upon his chest the red cross glowed as if lit from within. When I dared approach, he did not vanish, but simply turned away, and a wind unlike any I have felt before passed through my bones and stole the words from my lips." Was it madness, a trick of the mind, or did Brother Émile witness an echo, a spiritual imprint left upon the castle by a moment too intense to ever fade? Mystics speak of thin places, where the boundary between realms grows porous. where the veil frays and moments from the past bleed into the present. This fortress in Languedoc, with its inexplicable acoustics, glowing carvings, and whispering stones, may well be one of them. Within the chapel, long roofless and open to the sky, lies a slab of black stone, unlike any quarried locally. Smooth, without chisel marks, and perfectly square, it rests at the intersection of 4 stone pathways arranged in a cross. Each path aligns with a cardinal direction. Beneath the slab, legend says, lies the stone tongue of the temple, a metaphorical expression for the silent truths the Templars could never write, only encode. Archaeologists have drilled beneath it. They found nothing, but the locals and those who visit in secret speak of dreams. Vivid, luminous dreams that come only after sleeping near the chapel. Dreams of a spiral staircase descending into the earth, of soft blue light, of voices chanting in no known tongue, yet whose meaning feels unmistakably clear. These dreams often return years later, triggered by nothing more than the sound of a distant bell or the scent of old parchment. If the stones are dreaming, then they are sharing those dreams with those willing to listen. And there is another tale, one nearly lost to fire. In 1932, a fire ravaged the private collection of antiquarian Lucien Del Mare. Among the few salvaged documents was a letter dated 1689, from a traveling apothecary named Corbin Lavue. It detailed a visit to the castle and his discovery of a small, metal medallion wedged between 2 stones. The medallion bore a hexagram surrounding a blooming rose, symbols often linked to esoteric branches of early Christian mysticism. Corbin claimed that when he touched the medallion, the stones around him vibrated softly, and he heard the sound of water beneath his feet. He spoke of following that sound through a narrow stairwell that vanished the next morning. The medallion was lost in the fire, and no one has since found the stairwell, but the tale persists. Each piece, the carvings, the acoustics, the dreams, the vanished staircase, suggest a deliberate design, not merely to protect, but to preserve. A sanctum of memory, a living reliquary, not of bone or blood, but of resonance. Templar knowledge, so often reduced in modern tales to treasure or grails, may have been more abstract. A form of wisdom encoded into place, into symbol, into vibration. A wisdom never meant to be read, but to be experienced. So when you walk the ruins, should you ever find yourself there, step lightly. Let your breath slow, press your palm against the cold stone, feel its pulse, and you may hear it too. The echo in the stonework, the distant murmur of knights at prayer, the rustle of secrets that never left, only sank deeper into the silence. We now descend deeper. They were not cloaked in splendor, these men of the Silent Brotherhood. Their armor bore no jewels, their cloaks no embroidery, and yet, in the quiet spaces between scripture and sword, they harbored knowledge far heavier than gold. To the outside world, the Knights Templar were warriors sworn to protect pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem. But within the stone sanctuaries of their hidden strongholds, there were those among them who belonged to something deeper, an inner circle devoted not to conquest, but contemplation. They were known only in whispers as Frotres Tuchety, the Silent Brothers. No chronicles mention them by name. Their identities were obscured even within Templar ranks, but fragments of letters, marginal notes in illuminated manuscripts, and the strange alignments of their sacred architecture point to their presence, like constellations in a night sky, visible only to those who know where to look. The Silent Brothers did not fight in the Holy Land. They remained behind, in castles like the one buried in Languedoc's mist. Guardians not of treasure but of sacred memory. Their role, it seems, was to preserve a different kind of power, the power of forgotten wisdom, of ancient harmonies, of knowledge that predated even the church that sanctioned their order. A scroll discovered in 1876, buried in the scriptorium of a collapsed abbey near Narbonne, speaks of the brothers who speak with stones and stars, whose prayers are made not with lips, but with pattern and light. The script is in Latin, but the concepts are far older, evoking Gnostic imagery, Pythagorean symbolism, and echoes of Egyptian ritual. This was not mere mysticism, it was discipline, devotion, a ritual order existing in the liminal spaces between faith and mystery, between doctrine and silence. Their practices were subtle. A certain way of walking the halls, a specific pattern of candles placed during solstice, a whispered phrase repeated only once, at the threshold of dawn. These were not spells, but harmonics, acts designed to attune the space around them, to align mind and matter with an order no longer taught. At the heart of this practice was the vox petrae, the voice of the stone. They believed that sacred structures, if built with correct proportion and placement, could amplify the divine, that a chapel aligned with the solstice, with a roof echoing a star's path, could serve as a conduit for revelation. not a miracle of light, but a listening post between realms. The castle in Languedoc, with its inexplicable acoustics and geometrically precise layout, is believed to have been such a listening post, but the brothers themselves, they left few traces, only their silence. One parchment, however, does survive, locked away in the archives of a private monastery in Umbria. It bears no signature, only a red wax seal with a broken cross, the emblem known from a single surviving Templar medallion. The letter reads, in part, "We are not warriors of flesh, but of stillness. Ours is the watch at the threshold, the breath held between worlds. The outer order protects roads and pilgrims. We protect memory. What memory, we do not know. But those few words echo across the centuries like a chime struck once, yet never fading. There are legends of meetings held not in grand cathedrals, but in forests at twilight, circles formed by stones, water poured in silence, eyes closed, hands resting on earth. The rituals were not for show. They were never recorded, only felt, transmitted like vibration from one initiate to the next. Some scholars believe that the Silent Brothers were the keepers of an oral tradition so old it defied translation. Others speculate they preserved texts deemed heretical, fragments of the Gospel of Thomas, perhaps, or translations of Egyptian cosmology filtered through Greek and Arabic mystics. But it was not the content alone that mattered. It was how it was kept, not written but remembered, encoded in place, preserved in the way the sun strikes a certain window, in the echo of footsteps on spiral stairs, in a pattern of stars carved into the vaulted ceiling of a hidden crypt. In the early 20th century, a French researcher named Dr. Véron traveled to this very castle to study its geometry. Her notes, now held by the de Cluny, describe strange magnetic anomalies in the inner chapel. Compasses spun, iron filings clung to the air, and candles refused to burn near certain stones. Her conclusion: the chapel had been designed to echo not light, but frequency. She wrote, "The space is tuned like a bowl or an instrument. It is not meant to speak, but to respond. To what, I do not yet know." She, too, vanished. Her last correspondence, a brief letter to her sister, simply said, "I heard them." What did she hear? Was it the voice of stone, the murmur of the Silent Brotherhood? Or was it the lingering memory of those who had long since passed into legend? Some visitors today, those rare few who brave the overgrown path to the ruin, claim to feel a presence, not a ghost, but a stillness that waits, a sacred hush, as if entering a forgotten library where even thoughts must be quiet. One visitor described it this way: "The air was dense, like velvet, and every step felt like an intrusion. I did not see anything, but I felt watched, not with menace, but with patience, as if someone waited for me to ask the right question." The Silent Brotherhood, if they still echo in that place, are not protectors of relics, but of remembrance. They remind us that not all knowledge can be written, and not all mysteries need to be solved. Some exist simply to be held, quietly, like a candle in the dark, and in that silence, there is reverence, there is peace. Let us walk deeper still, toward the hidden crypt, where stone meets shadow and light no longer moves in straight lines. Beneath the keep, past a corridor so narrow it requires the body to turn sideways, past a spiral staircase worn into a soft dip by centuries of silent feet, there lies a space the sun has not touched in over 700 years. It is not marked on any map, nor does it appear in any inventory of the medieval fortress. And yet, it exists, a chamber of perfect silence, shaped in harmony with celestial design, whispered of only in fragments by those who dared to descend. They call it the Crypt of the Forgotten Star. It is not known when the chamber was carved. The stones that shape its walls bear no tool marks. Instead, they curve and lean inward as if they were grown, not built, embracing the space like the petals of a flower waiting to bloom. At the center rests a low stone table, not an altar in the Christian sense, but something older, deeper. Its surface is carved with constellations no longer found in modern skies, and at its center lies a five-pointed star inscribed within a circle, surrounded by inscriptions in a language no one has successfully translated. What little light enters the crypt comes from above, not through a window or torch slit, but from a narrow shaft descending from the chapel floor. For most of the year, the chamber remains in shadow, but on the night of the winter solstice, a thin beam of silver moonlight penetrates the shaft, illuminating the star carved into the table. It glows, not with fire, but with a strange luminescence, as though the stone itself recalls the light it once held. This was the Templars' true sanctum. The star is not merely symbolic, it is a map, not of lands, but of the sky. The sky as it appeared in a forgotten age, possibly predating the Templar Order itself. One constellation at the edge of the carving resembles Orion, but with a sixth star added to its belt. Another curves like the Pleiades, but with one star marked deliberately darker, as if to note something missing or hidden. Ancient astronomers spoke of a wandering star, a celestial force that drifted not by chance, but by will. Some cultures called it Nemesis, others named it the Black Sun, but to the Brotherhood that built this chamber, it seems to have held particular importance, a guiding principle, a cosmic memory. What was its purpose? Some believe it was a calendar, tracking celestial events tied to their rites. Others see it as a key part of a larger cipher involving architecture, alignment, and vibration. But those who've entered the chamber report something more subtle, a feeling, a presence. When one stands upon the star at solstice, heart slowed, breath still, there is a moment, fleeting, impossible to measure, where the silence deepens, the air seems to pause, and in that instant, something stirs within the stone, a sound not heard by ears, but felt by the bones. Like a note played on an instrument older than the world. A musical archaeologist named Klaus Ritter visited the site in 1987. He recorded nothing on his equipment, but later described the sensation in his journal. As the moonlight struck the table, I felt my heart resonate, as if it were being tuned. A low hum moved through the walls. It was not sound, it was memory, clothed in frequency. He too vanished 2 months later while investigating a similar structure in the Pyrenees. This crypt, this star, may have been the axis around which the entire castle turned. A hidden sanctuary not of worship, but of connection, to the heavens, to the earth, to the soul's deeper longings. A place where time does not pass, but circles. Where memory is not recalled, but experienced. It's easy to dismiss such things in the daylight, to rationalize, to reduce. But the men who built this chamber did not think as we do. They saw time as cyclical, not linear. They saw knowledge as sacred, not scientific. To them, a symbol was not a metaphor, it was a doorway. And that star, it may have opened a path. Among the few preserved writings of the Silent Brotherhood is a phrase repeated again and again. As above, so below. But the true temple lies within. Perhaps this crypt was not an endpoint, but a mirror. A space designed not to contain power, but to reflect it. To awaken something slumbering in those who entered. Something quiet and eternal. Some believe the Templars were protectors of relics. The Holy Grail, the Ark, the bones of saints. But the deeper mystery may be this: they protected places, harmonic structures, sites of resonance where body and soul might remember what modern minds have forgotten. The crypt of the Forgotten Star may be one such place. Its silence is not emptiness. It is invitation. To stand in its center is to step beyond language, beyond history, into memory that is not yours, but feels as though it always was. So, dreamer, should you ever descend into a chamber where the stars are carved into stone and the silence wraps around you like a cloak, pause, breathe, feel the shape of the space, and listen. You may not hear words, but you will not leave unchanged. Let us now ascend again, to the battlements, where wind and memory meet, and the stars above reflect those hidden below. High upon the northern tower of the forgotten fortress, etched into a slate of weather-worn stone, lies a circle. At first glance it appears simple. A compass rose, perhaps, or some lost noble's heraldry. But beneath the dust and lichen, beneath centuries of rainfall and silence, its purpose remains strikingly clear to those who know what to seek. This is no ordinary directional guide. It does not point north, nor does it chart the winds of sailors or soldiers. This is the Templar compass, a relic not of geography, but of alignment. It points not outward, but inward and upward. The rose at its center is divided not into the usual 8 or 16 points, but into 13. Each segment contains a symbol, some recognizable, like the sun, the crescent moon, the cross. Others defy classification. A spiral opening clockwise into a black dot, a triangle with wings, and eyes surrounded by flames. There are no letters, no numbers, only forms, primordial, dreamlike, vibrating with a sense of ancient intent. Why 13? In medieval symbology, 13 was often feared, a number of betrayal, of endings, but within the Templar worldview, it held other meanings. It marked transition, the end of the known and the threshold to the sacred unknown. The 12 apostles, and the 13th, unspoken, the 12 signs of the zodiac, and the 13th gate beyond them, the one that does not rise in the sky, but sinks into the soul. The Templar compass, it seems, was a tool for spiritual navigation. Its markings align not with earthly directions, but with sacred sites and celestial events. Scholars studying its geometry have noted strange correlations. One point aligns precisely with Mount Hermon in the Levant, the mountain some believe to be the true site of divine descent. Another aligns with Glastonbury Tor, yet another with the ancient ruins at Bolbec. These are not military coordinates, they are places where, according to legend, the veil between realms is thinner, sacred intersections of heaven and earth. One point, the 13th, is unaligned. It points not to any known location. Instead, it rises upward at a slight angle, leading away from the earth entirely, as if marking a path to something beyond the stars. There are stories that the Templars followed these points, not to conquer, but to commune, that the compass was used during midnight rites, beneath the full moon. Each brother would stand upon a sigil carved into the chapel floor, their orientation dictated by the compass. Incense would rise, and chants would swell, not in Latin, but in tones, pure sound, resonating with stone, heart, and breath. One chronicler, a wandering Moorish mystic named Yusuf ibn Halil, wrote of such a rite after being welcomed into a Templar outpost in Portugal. His scroll, now kept in the University of Coimbra, recounts, "They sang not to the sky, but with it. Their bodies faced the compass points, their eyes closed, as if listening to something beyond hearing. When they finished, the chamber was warmer, though no fire burned. One among them wept in silence, as if touched by something long forgotten." Was this ritualistic nonsense? Or a forgotten practice of attunement, a way of aligning the self with unseen harmonies? The Templars understood what many ancient cultures believed, that place, time, and orientation mattered. The human soul, like a key, must be shaped to fit the locks of sacred spaces. And the compass, in its cryptic design, was such a shaping tool. But it was also a warning. Beneath the 13th point is carved a line of text, so eroded it can barely be made out. Yet those who have studied it under angled light and chalk have deciphered the Latin, "Nolla via nisi interior," no path but inward. It is a statement of profound implication, that beyond all journeys, to the Holy Land, to the stars, to the secret vaults beneath stone, the truest pilgrimage is inward, through memory, through silence, through surrender. The compass, then, is a mirror, a reflection of the soul's uncharted terrain. One of the few Templar journals recovered from a ruined priory in Poitou includes a drawing of a similar compass, accompanied by a simple question, written in elegant hand. What is the direction of your silence? Not your footsteps. Your silence. What does it face? What does it draw you toward? These are not the musings of idle men. These were warriors of faith, men who bled on battlefields, yet knelt in candlelight with questions that shattered the boundaries of creed. They did not seek to dominate mystery, but to dwell within it, and they left behind not answers, but maps, not of places, but of experience. This compass, forgotten on a wind-beaten tower, is one such map. So if you ever find yourself among ruins, and you stumble upon a pattern of lines that lead nowhere, pause, trace them with your finger, let their shape sink into your mind. Close your eyes, and ask yourself not where you are, but where you are facing. For the Templar compass does not guide steps, it guides remembrance. And it reminds us that the greatest secrets are not lost in the dark, but in the silence we forget how to hear. It is perhaps the most recognizable emblem of the medieval world, a blood-red cross upon a white mantle, worn not as decoration, but as declaration. The Templar cross, stark and unyielding, symbolized purity, sacrifice, and spiritual warfare, but beneath its simplicity lies a deeper enigma. For the cross was not just worn, it was encoded, replicated, and, in one surviving manuscript, transformed. They say every Templar swore his vows before a copy of the Liber Nigrae Crucis, the Black Book of the Cross. No known copy of this book survives intact. It is not referenced in official records. The Church never acknowledged its existence, yet fragments persist, scattered across time and parchment, surfacing like embers from a forgotten fire. A single page in a Venetian archive, a margin note in a Cistercian codex, a damaged binding discovered in a hollow wall of a castle in Aragon. Together, they hint at something profound, that the Red Cross was not merely a symbol of martyrdom, but a sigil of memory, a living map that, when understood, could unlock the mysteries of heaven and earth. The book, as described in the journal of Brother Matthias of Clever, was bound in black goat leather, warm to the touch, with no title on its spine. Its pages were vellum, but unnaturally smooth, and the ink shimmered faintly when held to candlelight. It contained neither prayers nor commandments, but diagrams, Circles within circles, crosses at odd angles, stars stitched into grids, and rivers flowing backward. At its center was a single phrase written in gold, crux est clavis. The cross is the key, but a key to what? Some claim the book was a cipher, a compendium of esoteric geometry and hidden alignments, used to identify sites of spiritual resonance. Others argue it was a meditative guide, designed to initiate the reader into higher states of awareness. There are even whispers that it held the names of stars that no longer shine in our skies. A celestial ledger passed down from older worlds. One of the most haunting descriptions comes from a Jesuit inquisitor named Father Leon de Mazuo, who encountered a fragment of the book during an investigation in 1614. He described it thus: the ink burned slightly at the edges, as though resisting the air. The cross was drawn not in red, but in deepest blue, and within it was inscribed a word I dared not speak aloud. The friar who showed it to me wept as he turned the page, and when I asked why, he said, "Because now I cannot forget." The cross within the black book was not the upright form seen on tabards and flags. It was tilted leaning to the left, its arms thickened at the edges, as if warped by gravity or memory. Around it, a wheel of flame, 12 points forming a zodiacal mandala. At the bottom, a single star, black as pitch, encircled by silver leaves. This was not a symbol of war. It was a diagram of passage, a passage between states of being, between worlds, between forgetting and remembering. The Templars understood symbols not as mere signs, but as vessels. The Red Cross, so often misunderstood as a banner of conquest, may have been a veil, a mask behind which the true teachings were hidden. Those teachings, preserved in part within the Black Book, were never meant for the masses. They required stillness, suffering, surrender, and silence. In 1901, a French antiquarian named Jean-Luc Fournier claimed to have discovered a hidden vault beneath the library of the destroyed Templar commandery in La Rochelle. Among the rubble was a scorched fragment of vellum containing 4 diagrams and 1 sentence. The cross opens the gate when the watcher sleeps. This single line has become the subject of endless speculation. Who or what is the watcher? Is it the rational mind, the inner guardian of fear, or some deeper metaphysical force guarding the soul's ascent? The Silent Brothers would not have answered. They would have pointed, perhaps, to the crypt, to the compass, to the stars etched in stone, and then they would have said nothing, for their teachings were not of speech, but of experience. Modern scholars, when confronted with the fragments of the Black Book, often dismiss it as Gnostic fantasy, an invention of desperate mystics clinging to meaning. But others, those who approach the mystery with reverence, describe something else, a sensation, a familiarity, as if the symbols do not teach, but remind, as if the Red Cross was always known, buried deep in the memory of the soul, waiting to be reawakened by the whisper of ink and light. To see the cross not just with the eye, but with the inward gaze, to let it open, something hidden within, is to step across a threshold, not into dogma, but into wonder. And so we return to the forgotten castle, where perhaps a copy of the Black Book once lay sealed in a chamber of salt and cedar. Perhaps it still does, waiting for hands steady enough to open it without seeking to possess, for minds quiet enough to receive without grasping. The Red Cross remains, etched into stone, woven into legends, painted into dreams. It is a question carved in silence, and only those who do not rush to answer may hear the reply. There is a particular kind of silence that falls only under a full moon. It is not the hush of midnight sleep, nor the stillness of winter snow, but something deeper, a breathless pause in the rhythm of the world, as if all of nature leans in to listen. It was under such a moon, say the old stories, that the Templars gathered in the inner court of the castle, not for battle or council, but for something older and stranger, the moonlight ritual. It was not a rite taught to all, only those of the inner circle. The Silent Brothers knew its patterns. Its time was dictated not by the calendar of kings or the liturgical year, but by the heavens. The ritual could only be performed when the moon was full and the silver light aligned perfectly with the central window of the ruined chapel, illuminating the spiral engraved into the stone floor. The spiral was not decorative. It was a path, chiseled so faintly that it could not be seen by day. It revealed itself only when struck by moonlight. The lines shimmered, not from any material, but as if the light itself had memory, as if it remembered what it was meant to touch. The spiral curled inward, 7 turns total, ending in a small circle at its heart. And there, they say, the brothers would kneel, cloaked not in armor, but in silence. What happened then? We can only gather hints. a 14th century parchment preserved in the monastic library of records a vision seen by a Cathar prisoner during his final night in captivity. In it, he described a circle of hooded men, their hands raised not in supplication, but in resonance, as if conducting sound through the air. He wrote, "They did not speak, they hummed. Each voice matched the other, rising like mist. The light gathered around them, bending toward the stone. And when they stopped, there was no more moon." Another account, buried in the Vatican's Index of Suppressed Writings, comes from a Dominican inquisitor named Brother Renatus. He claimed to have infiltrated a Templar ritual site and observed their rites from a hidden alcove. His record is brief and incomplete, but it contains one unsettling sentence: "They summoned not spirits, but memory itself, walking backward into time." It is said that during the moonlight ritual, the brothers aligned their breath with the rhythm of the stars, inhaling as the light crested the chapel's central axis, exhaling as it passed the altar. Their hearts beat in unison, their minds emptied, and in that state of perfect alignment, something opened, not a door in stone, but a veil within. Witnesses, or those who claim to be ascribed visions, a field of stars, seen from beneath the earth, voices speaking without words, their meaning arriving fully formed, a feeling of being watched, not with judgment, but with recognition, as if the stones themselves remembered who you were before you had a name. One particularly strange account comes from a shepherd named Jules Bernard, who in 1803 stumbled upon the ruins during a solstice night. He later reported that the entire courtyard was bathed in blue light, though the moon was nowhere in the sky. He saw figures, not shadows, not men, but outlines of presence, moving along the spiral, then vanishing into the stone. When he approached, there was nothing, but he felt changed. He stopped tending sheep that year and became a recluse. Some dismissed him as mad. Others, especially the older villagers, simply nodded and said, "He walked the moon's path." But what was the purpose of the ritual? Was it a rite of remembrance, a transmission of sacred knowledge from one generation to the next? Or was it something stranger still, a communion not with the divine, but with the architecture of time? If the spiral is a path, then its end is not a destination, but a center, a still point. And from that center, in the quiet of moonlight, the soul might hear its original name. The ritual was not spectacle. It was not performed for the sake of power or praise. It was a return, a moment in which the linear grip of time loosened, and those gathered stood not in the 13th century, or the 14th, but in a timeless now, a space between seconds, where the stars above and the stones below spoke the same language. The Silent Brothers kept this rite alive, not for doctrine, but for memory, a memory that was not theirs alone. Perhaps that is why the spiral remains, eroded, but intact. It is not an invitation, but a whisper, a question carved into the earth. Will you walk the spiral? Will you let the moonlight open the doorway? For in every age, there are those who seek, not answers, not miracles, but the silence between breaths, the presence that lingers when the last note fades, and in that presence they find not knowledge, but remembering. The ritual is no longer performed, the courtyard is empty, but the moon still rises, the spiral still waits, and somewhere, perhaps, the stones still listen. There is a passage beneath the chapel, narrow, unlit, and half collapsed with time, known only through legend and the journals of a single 18th century monk. It descends not straight, but in a gentle curve, like the coiling of a seashell or the winding of an ancient melody. At its end lies a chamber, so say the whispers, where voices once rose not to proclaim, but to harmonize, not in language, but in resonance. They called it the hidden choir. Unlike the grand choirs of Gothic cathedrals, where music echoed through ribbed vaults and sunlight danced upon stained glass, the Templar choir was secret, subterranean, and silent to the world above. No one sang there for praise or performance. Instead, they sang to remember the shape of sound, to recall the notes that build the world. The Silent Brothers believed in a truth few dared to utter, that creation itself began not with a word, but with a tone, a single harmonic frequency from which all forms emerged, the vox mundi, the voice of the world. Their rituals were shaped around rediscovering that primordial note, recreating it within the bones of their fortress, allowing it to rise through their own bodies as living instruments. This was not music, it was alignment. In the chamber of the hidden choir, the walls are curved in such a way that even a whisper travels without decay. When two tones are sung in harmony, the room amplifies them, folding them upon each other until the air vibrates as if made of silver threads. One visitor, a sound engineer named Henry Lauvier, who entered the chamber in 1929 during a brief excavation, described the experience in his field notes. We sang a single note, AC, and the room answered. The tone grew louder, fuller, yet none of us had raised our voice. It was as if the stone remembered a song and was teaching us how to hear it again. He went on to write that, when three voices harmonized, each singing a pure interval apart, a fourth tone emerged unbidden. It was not played, not sung, but born in the space between. This phenomenon, known to modern acousticians as the phantom fundamental or combination tone, was not unknown to the ancients. Pythagoras wrote of it, Sufi mystics tuned their flutes to it, and the Silent Brothers, it seems, built a chamber to summon it, not for beauty, but for remembering. The choir chamber was circular, with 12 niches carved into the walls, each one shaped differently, each resonating at a unique frequency when struck or sung toward. It is said that during ritual, 12 brothers would stand in these alcoves, each holding a single tone. In the center stood the 13th, silent, listening, not conducting, receiving. He would listen not just with ears, but with breath, skin, bone, and when the tones aligned, when the frequencies formed the chord that opened the inner veil, he would feel it, a hum not of the world, but of something beyond it. A few scholars who have studied similar structures in Armenia, southern Italy, and the Levant believe that the Templars inherited this knowledge from older traditions, perhaps passed down from the architects of desert monasteries, or preserved in secret by those who studied the resonance of tombs and temples long before the birth of Rome. In each case, the design is similar, a central chamber, circular or octagonal, surrounded by tuned alcoves. No iconography, no altar, only shape, tone, and silence. These spaces were not for worship, but for alignment. In one recovered fragment of the Black Book, there is a passage. When the voices are as one, the veil is thinnest. The echo becomes the guide. The listener becomes the door. What does it mean to become a door? Not to open a passage in stone, but to become the passage, a threshold through which memory, light, and presence flow. Some say that after each choir ritual, the brothers would sit in stillness for hours, their eyes closed, their breathing matched, that afterward, for days, they would speak little, as if their voices were recovering from having touched something too pure to name. The hidden choir, then, was not meant to impress. It was not meant to survive in history books. It was meant to attune to the lost frequencies of the soul, to the song that lies beneath the noise of the world, and perhaps, most importantly, to remind us that the deepest truths cannot be spoken, only sung, and only once the ear has learned how to truly listen. If you find the passage, hidden behind the eastern stair, beneath a stone marked with a faded spiral, do not rush. Let the silence greet you. Let your heart beat slow until it becomes a drum in the dark. Then hum, gently, the note that comes to your lips unbidden. If the chamber responds, you are not alone. You are in the presence of the choir, and it remembers you. Beneath the oldest wing of the castle, beneath even the crypt and the choir, there lies a chamber untouched by the winds of time. It is not listed in any surviving architectural plan, and its entrance is obscured by rubble that no storm has disturbed, as if the earth itself protects what lies beyond. To reach it, one must first pass through a narrow tunnel hidden behind a half-collapsed apse, descend 13 uneven steps into blackness, and enter a maze of interlocking corridors. This is the labyrinth, not in the mythological sense of beasts and traps, but in the ancient sense, a space designed not to confuse the body, but to awaken the mind. The path winds and folds upon itself, not randomly, but according to principles found in sacred geometry, in the coils of galaxies, and in the inner chambers of certain Himalayan stars. There are no markings on the walls, no torch brackets, no evidence of ceremony, only the silence. And at its heart, deep within, at the very center of the winding stone, there is a chamber, small, circular, perfectly smooth. Its walls curve inward, and on one side stands a single object, a mirror, but not of silvered glass. The mirror in the labyrinth is a polished disk of obsidian, volcanic glass, dark and deep as night, nearly a meter in height. It rests upon a slab of limestone, surrounded by 12 small candles in holders shaped like blooming roses. The mirror does not reflect like modern glass. Its surface is too dark, too alive. Those who have stood before it speak not of seeing their face, but of seeing something through, a movement behind their own eyes, a flicker of memory that does not belong to the waking world. In 1907, an English antiquarian named Thomas Wren claimed to have reached the labyrinth's heart after studying Templar blueprints unearthed in Toulouse. His journal, though incomplete, was recovered from his lodgings in Carcassonne. It contains a single entry under the heading "The Mirror." It showed me my own face, but changed, older and younger, as if I had lived this life before. Behind me stood figures in white, unmoving. I could not turn, I could not breathe. I saw myself kneeling in a place I have never known, and yet I wept, as if returning home. He vanished 2 weeks later. His journal ends abruptly. The page after the mirror is torn. What power lies within a stone mirror? Obsidian has long been associated with seeing beyond, used by the Maya and the Aztecs as a portal tool, a surface for spirit vision. The ancient Greeks believed polished black surfaces revealed the hidden realm of Hades, and the Templars, it seems, inherited this tradition, but repurposed it. They did not use the mirror for prophecy. They used it for remembering. There are no writings that explain how the mirror was used, only fragments of ritual phrases. Let what is forgotten arise. Face not the world, but the witness. The mirror shows not light, but origin. One tale, passed quietly through generations of villagers, tells of a woman who entered the ruins as a child. She was mute until that night. Upon her return, she spoke only one sentence before falling into a deep, peaceful sleep. I saw my mother before she was born. It is not a tool, this mirror, it is a threshold. It reveals not the future, but the echo of a soul through time, the unspoken layers of being that memory alone cannot reach. Standing before the mirror in the labyrinth is said to dissolve all pretense. There the self is stripped of role and name, seen only as a pulse within the fabric of eternity. Some call it illusion, others call it awakening. The Silent Brothers would never speak of it. Those chosen to descend into the labyrinth were few. They prepared in fasting and in song, not to manipulate what lay beyond the glass, but to ready themselves for what they might see, because once seen, it could not be unseen. And yet, those who returned from the mirror did so changed. They did not speak more, they spoke less. Their gaze grew softer, their step more patient, as if they now carried not a burden, but a knowing, a quiet certainty that beneath the surface of things, all is connected, that nothing truly vanishes, that the face in the mirror is not just one's own, but all who came before, and all who will come again. So, if, dreamer, you ever find yourself in such a place, in a room carved of silence, facing a mirror that shows more than reflection, do not fear what you see, do not flee, stand still, breathe, and let what stirs in the depths of the glass rise to meet you, for the mirror does not lie. It only reveals what you have long forgotten to remember. It seems impossible at first that beneath the cold, hard bones of a medieval fortress, under layers of flagstone and time, there could lie something soft, something living, something green, and yet, hidden far below the foundations of the keep, veiled from the sun for centuries, there is said to be a garden, a secret sanctuary, a garden beneath the stone. Few have seen it, fewer still have returned. But those who have, or claim to have, speak of it in tones that tremble with awe, not because of its beauty, though beauty it has in abundance, not because of its mystery, though mystery saturates every leaf, every breath of its damp air, but because of what it feels like. They say it feels like remembering paradise. The entrance is unmarked. It is said to lie beneath a stone, etched not with a name, but with a single flower, a rose in full bloom, its petals spiraling inward. To find it, one must first descend through the labyrinth, past the mirror, and press one's hand against the leftmost pillar. If done at the proper time, the moment when the full moon stands directly overhead, the stone will warm beneath the palm, and then it opens, not mechanically, not with noise or motion, but simply, it's open. A passage of smooth steps descends, lit not by torch or lantern, but by a soft blue glow that seems to seep from the very walls. No moss grows there, no root intrudes, only the scent of myrrh and rain and something older than language. At the bottom lies the garden, not vast, no more than a courtyard. Its walls rise high, curved in perfect arches, open at the top to a shaft of moonlight that pours down like silver water. The ground is covered in soft moss and tiny star-shaped blossoms. A small spring bubbles in the center, its source unknown, and all around plants grow that do not grow anywhere else, flowers without names, vines that coil and uncurl like breath, trees that bear no fruit but whose leaves sing faintly when touched by the wind. Botanists who have heard the legends dismiss it as a dream. No such flora exists. But dream or not, the descriptions are consistent. In every telling there is one feature that remains unchanged. At the far wall stands a tree. A single tree, its bark as pale as bone, its branches spread wide, and its roots are not in the ground, but in the stone. They twist into the very foundation of the castle, as though feeding not on soil, but on memory. Some call it the tree of the veil, others, the tree of silence. Its leaves shimmer with a faint light, even in darkness. Those who have stood beneath its boughs report sensations unlike any other: warmth along the spine, the sudden recall of childhood moments long forgotten, a feeling of being held. One account, preserved in the handwritten notes of a 19th-century mystic named Madame Solange de Valois, reads, "The tree knew me. As I approached, a breeze rose though no wind blew. The leaves trembled, and in that trembling I heard my name, not the name I wear, but the name I had before I was born. I wept without shame. I did not want to leave." She never returned to the surface. Her journal was found near the steps, her cloak folded neatly upon it. Some believe she chose to remain. Others think the garden does not release those who are not ready to forget again. But what is this place? Was it planted? Was it found? Did the Templars build their fortress atop it? Or was the garden already there, waiting? In one preserved verse, a hymn attributed to the Silent Brotherhood, we find this line: "Stone is the skin of Eden, sealed until the stars return." Perhaps the garden is not a garden at all. Perhaps it is a memory, not of one person, but of humanity itself, a buried echo of wholeness, of balance, a sacred pocket, untouched by time's corrosion, blooming gently beneath the weight of empire and war and forgetting. The Templars, it seems, did not guard treasure. They guarded remembrance, and the garden, whether physical or spiritual, was the heart of that remembrance. It was a place of return, not to a past event, but to a state of being, of stillness, of presence, of truth. If you should ever find it, dreamer, tread gently, do not ask questions, do not pick the flowers, sit, listen, let the tree know you, and in that silence you may remember who you are beneath your name, beneath your history, beneath the dust of the world. You may remember the garden you left long ago, and in doing so, you may never truly leave again. In the long shadow of time, where names fade and banners fall to dust, symbols endure. Some are carved in stone, others etched in the memory of those who walked veiled paths, but a few, the rarest, carry not merely meaning, but intention. They are more than marks, they are keys. And one such key was the seal of the Silent Brotherhood. Unlike the Templars' public sigil, 2 knights on a single horse, the red cross, the equal-armed cross, potent, the seal of the inner circle was never meant to be seen. It was never emblazoned on shields or flags. It was whispered, concealed, encrypted into architecture and melody. And yet, it appears, in shadows, in light, in places it should not. First described in a 15th-century inventory of Templar artifacts seized by inquisitors in Avignon, the seal was drawn on the inside cover of an unmarked manuscript, a design so simple and yet so precise it was initially dismissed as decorative. A circle, open at the top, within it, a downward-pointing triangle. Inside the triangle, an eye, not wide, but gently closed. And below it, a rose with 13 petals, no text, no signature. Only a faint inscription beneath. Custodes Memoriae, guardians of memory. The circle was not complete, a single break at the top, just wide enough to let the eye wander. Some interpret this as openness, others, a portal, still others, a symbol of unfinished work, of a path that must be completed, not on paper but within the soul. The triangle, pointing downward, was unusual for Templar design. Most symbols of the time emphasized upward movement, aspiration toward the divine, but this triangle descended, as if grounding the seeker into the body, into earth, into now. The closed eye may be the most mysterious. In a world that prized divine vision, why seal the eye? Why veil what so many sought to unveil? A marginal note in a Cistercian manuscript may hold the answer. To see beyond, one must first unsee what is false. The closed eye does not symbolize blindness, but inward vision, the ability to perceive not with light, but with stillness. And the rose, always the rose, blooms again. 13 petals, not the 12 of apostles or zodiac. 13, the number beyond completion, the turning of the wheel, the gate beyond time. Those who bore the seal were not known by name. Their identities were veiled even within the order. They moved between commanderies in silence, never staying long, always watching. Their purpose was not to lead, but to keep, not authority, but remembrance. Their charge, to protect the sacred rhythm, to preserve not the dogma of the outer world, but the resonance of the inner one. It is said that each silent brother carried the seal in some form, not openly, but hidden, engraved beneath a ring, woven into the lining of a cloak, etched in oil upon the inside of a wooden shield, not to declare allegiance, but to remind themselves in moments of fear, doubt, or forgetting, of the path they walked. In 1853, A mason repairing the inner wall of the ruined Templar chapel in Languedoc uncovered a tile that rang hollow. Beneath it lay a clay cylinder sealed in wax. Within a scroll, its ink had faded to dust, but pressed into the wax seal was the image, the open circle, the downward triangle, the sleeping eye, the rose. It is now held in the Day and Lion, locked behind glass. No institution has successfully translated the full meaning of the seal, but those who study it report dreams of walking long corridors, of humming stone, of being followed not by fear but by presence. One researcher, Professor Alain Driot, described a moment while sketching the seal in his study. I felt as though someone stood behind me, not watching, remembering, not threatening, waiting. The seal is not a password. It is not a sigil of command. It is an invocation, a tuning fork struck gently in the chamber of the soul, awakening echoes long silent. Some believe the seal appears to those ready to remember, not in vision, but in symbol, in the pattern of raindrops on stone, in the spiral of a shell, in the petals of a flower seen at twilight. The Silent Brotherhood has long since vanished from history's stage, their names lost, their voices quiet, but the seal remains, not carved in monuments, but hidden in dreams, waiting. So if, one night, you find yourself sketching a shape you do not recognize, a circle, a triangle, a closed eye, a blooming rose, pause, feel your breath, feel the stillness within you, and know that you are not alone. The guardians still remember, and perhaps so do you. Deep within the stone belly of the forgotten fortress lies a room so secret it is named not in any parchment, but only in breath. It is spoken of in fragments, in visions recorded by dreamers and mystics, by those who have entered the ruins not with lanterns, but with silence in their hearts. They call it the Chamber of 13 Flames. It lies beyond the labyrinth, beneath the mirror, past the garden, and deeper than the roots of the pale tree. It is not marked by any door, and yet, those who are meant to find it always do, for the chamber does not open to feet, it opens to remembrance. According to the most persistent legends, the chamber is circular. Of course it is, for the circle is the symbol of eternity, of unity, of the soul before it forgets itself. The walls are carved of dark stone, smooth and echoless, as if they drink sound. No torch burns there, no light falls from above, and yet, in its center, burn 13 flames, not candles, not fire, flames. Each rests atop a slender stone pillar, equidistant from one another, forming a circle within the room's perfect geometry. They do not flicker, they do not cast shadows, they simply burn, blue, gold, white, and deep crimson, each with a distinct hue, as if lit from within the memory of starlight. The flames have no source, no wick, no fuel, no heat. They burn in silence, and in that silence, they speak. What they say, none can repeat in words, for theirs is not a language of tongues, but of tone, color, vibration, the speech of soul to soul. One Templar fragment, perhaps the closest we have to a description, was found beneath a flagstone in an abandoned commandery in the Pyrenees, its ink nearly erased. It bore only these lines: the flames are not fire, but memory. Each burns a name, not of man, but of origin. We stand within them to recall our place in the dance. What dance? Some believe the flames correspond to 13 sacred principles, not commandments, but harmonics. Others say they are the echoes of 13 souls, keepers of the inner light, whose presence remains to guide the seeking heart. But one thing is known. Only those who carry the seal may enter, not the physical seal, the inner one. That gentle alignment within between heart and breath, between silence and sound, that tunes the soul like a bowl carved for resonance. When that inner chord is struck, when the seeker's being hums in tune with the ancient note, the chamber opens. There are stories, quiet, half-remembered, of those who reached the flames and stood among them. Each chose a pillar, each faced inward, and then they sang. Not a hymn, not a chant, a single note, each their own, untrained, unrefined, true. As the voices rose, the flames lifted, and at the center, something descended. Not a presence, but a knowing, not a god, but a memory of what it is to be whole. They say the room spun, not around them, but within them. That time ceased, that they remembered who they were before birth, that they saw not past lives, but the lives of others as their own. That grief vanished, that fear became vapor, that peace, true aching peace, settled into the marrow. One seeker, a monk who never gave his name, emerged from the ruin at dawn. His hair had turned white, his eyes were calm. When asked what he had seen, he said only, "I stood in the place before light, and the light knew me." There is speculation, of course, Skeptics call it myth. But those who study acoustics, geometry, and the ancient architectures of sound have long acknowledged that such chambers do strange things to consciousness. They compress the field, they create resonance that can alter awareness. They press the soul gently against its own boundaries until something seeps through. And so the Chamber of 13 Flames may be real, or it may be a dream cast backward in time, a vision left by those who knew humanity would one day forget its own inner light. But the Templars, or at least those among them who walked the deeper path, never forgot. They kept the chamber hidden, not out of greed, but out of reverence, because they understood that power does not live in flame or stone, it lives in stillness. And the 13 flames do not burn to dazzle, they burn to remind, to call the weary soul home. So if you ever feel the presence of warmth with no fire, or light with no source, or peace that arrives with no reason, pause. You may be standing near one of the pillars, whether in this world or another. You may be hearing the hum of the ancient song. You may, without knowing it, be standing in the circle of the flames, and they remember you. Long before the sky was mapped in charts, before the heavens were divided by telescope and mathematics, there were those who looked upward not to conquer, but to commune. Among them was a man whose name has been lost, yet whose story lives on in soft echoes, passed in low voices across the windswept hills of Languedoc, remembered not by records, but by resonance. He was a Templar, but also a stargazer. Unlike his brothers, who trained with sword and scripture, he spent his nights alone on the battlements, wrapped in silence, gazing skyward, not to predict battle or harvest, but to listen. For he believed the stars were not distant fires, but memory, lights that pulsed with the songs of what was and what would be. They called him La the Star Brother. He built, within the eastern tower of the fortress, a chamber open to the night sky. No roof, only 4 arched windows aligned with the solstices and equinoxes. In the center, a stone basin filled not with water, but with polished obsidian, a mirror for the sky. Each night he would sit beside it, still as the stars themselves, and watch their slow dance across the surface. He recorded nothing, and yet, his thoughts remain, in the margins of a single manuscript. A battered copy of Pseudo-Dionysius' Celestial Hierarchy found in a Templar library near Poitiers are delicate notations in an unfamiliar hand. The ink is faint, the script tight, the words meandering and poetic, not analytical. When Orion breathes low over the garden, the root stirs beneath the stone. The Pleiades sing not in light, but in forgetting. Tonight, I saw the curve between 2 stars bend inward, and I remembered her name. Who she was, none can say. But among the Silent Brotherhood, there were tales of a feminine principle, not a goddess, but a presence, not the Virgin of the Church, but an older embodiment, the soul of the world, the memory that waits. The Star Brother believed the stars were her language, and he spent his life learning it. One story says he disappeared on the winter solstice, that he was last seen seated beside the obsidian basin, eyes fixed on the night sky, lips slightly parted as if listening to a whisper. When dawn rose, he was gone. No footprints, no disturbance. But a single thing was left behind, a rose, freshly bloomed, lying in the basin, though it was winter and no rosebush grew within the walls. Others say he was taken, not in body, but in spirit, that he crossed the veil not by death, but by ascent, lifted on the harmony between star and soul, drawn into the memory from which he came. Whatever the truth, the chamber remains, abandoned, yes, crumbled in parts, but the windows still face their celestial marks. And on nights when the sky is clear and no wind stirs, the basin, now dry and cracked, reflects stars that are no longer visible in the heavens. Astronomers dismiss this, but seekers pause, for they know that time does not move only forward, it circles, it remembers, and the stargazer, the Templar whose silence was his scripture, knew this too. He is said to have taught only one thing to those who asked: let your eyes rise only when your breath has stilled. Then the stars will show you not where you are, but who you are. His legacy is not doctrine, it is presence. He walked the battlements as one walks a shoreline, listening to the waves of sky in silence. He knelt in the garden to feel the pulse of root and star. He stood in the choir chamber, not to sing, but to hum a single tone, his own, until the room answered. He became a bridge, not a teacher, not a prophet, a bridge, and the Silent Brotherhood honored him not with relics, but with ritual. On the solstice, they would gather in the tower, stand in the 4 windows, and hum 4 tones, woven together, until the basin shimmered, not with light, but with memory. So if, one night, your gaze lifts to the sky and you feel a shiver, not of cold, but of familiarity. Pause. You are not looking at stars. You are looking at echoes, at the language of the soul, at the place where time and light and love remember themselves. And perhaps, if you listen with stillness, you too will hear her whisper. And remember, names are fragile things. They wear down with use, fade from memory, dissolve into dust. And yet, there are names that do not die, names never spoken aloud, never written in ink, yet somehow preserved, not in books or stone, but in the architecture of the soul. Beneath the eastern transept of the Templar fortress, beneath even the layers of labyrinth, mirror, garden, and choir, lies a vault sealed for centuries, its doorway masked by symmetry and shadow. It is known only as the Vault of the Undying Name. Legends tell of a name preserved there, one so old and true it predates language itself. Not a name in the conventional sense, but the original tone of identity, the vibratory essence of the self before birth, before division, before forgetting. To approach it was never an act of reading, but of remembering. The vault is hexagonal, 6 sides echoing the geometry of honeycomb, of crystal, of snowflake, all forms that whisper the universe's underlying order. Each wall bears an engraving, a sigil too old for Latin, too precise for invention. Some scholars have likened them to Phoenician glyphs, others to Proto-Sumerian stela, but none have succeeded in translation, for the language here is not phonetic, it is harmonic. Each glyph corresponds to a frequency, a resonance, and when struck, not with mallet or hammer, but with voice, each symbol sings. The walls hum faintly in response, as if the chamber itself is tuning to the one who enters. It is not a test, it is an invitation. One Templar scroll, hidden within a double binding of a 14th century breviary, described the vault as the chamber where the name is not given, but revealed. What name? Not the name written in birth ledgers or chiseled on tombs, but the true name, the one spoken by the stars at the soul's becoming. The one forgotten at first breath, remembered only in deepest sleep, or at the edge of death, or when silence is pure enough to hear it again. This is what the vault holds, not relics, not gold, not even knowledge in the traditional sense, but the undying name of the self. To enter the vault, one had to cross the path of 13 doors, each one corresponding to a principle of the inner order. Not commandments, but qualities: stillness, humility, memory, presence, surrender, listening, compassion, longing, reverence, joy, wonder, silence, return. Only when the heart bore these like garments could the vault be opened. Only then would the final door, a circular seal marked with a single unbroken line, open of its own accord. Inside, no candle burns, and yet the vault glows. The air within is neither warm nor cold. It feels familiar, like the breath before a kiss, like the hush in the womb, like the moment before waking, when the dream still holds you gently. At the center of the chamber is a pedestal. Upon it, nothing, no scroll, no inscription, only a place to kneel, to breathe, to listen. Because the name, the true name, is not written there, it is written in you. And in that space, beneath stone and time, the silence speaks it back to you. Not in sound, but in knowing. A sudden warmth in the spine, a pulse behind the eyes, a moment of stillness where all questions cease. This, say the stories, is the gift of the vault. Not knowledge of the world, but remembrance of the soul. The Silent Brotherhood guarded it not with blades, but with presence, not with secrecy, but with sacred waiting. Because they knew, this name cannot be taken, taught, or given. It can only be received, and only by those ready to carry it with reverence. One Templar, whose name has indeed been lost, left behind only this sentence on a wax tablet: I went into the vault. I left with nothing, and yet, I am whole. So if, in your quietest moments, you feel a longing you cannot name, a soft ache, a pull toward something just beyond the veil of thought, do not push it away. It may be the echo of your undying name, calling you home. Among the many tales that drift through the mists surrounding the ancient Templar stronghold, none is so strange, nor so quietly revered, as the story of the pilgrim who walked backward. His name has long since vanished, erased by time and silence, but the shape of his path remains, carved not in stone, but in memory. He was not a knight, not a monk, not a scholar. He arrived unannounced one morning, barefoot and cloaked in plain wool, walking up the slope toward the fortress with his back turned to it. Step by step, he ascended, never looking forward, always walking backward. The villagers, watching from the fields below, thought him mad, but the Templars opened the gate. Without question, without challenge, for among the inner circle, his coming had been foretold, not in prophecy, but in pattern. The ancient teachings of the Silent Brotherhood spoke of a pilgrim who would return the way he came, one who would carry within him the forgotten map of return, not to a place, but to a state of being. He would not seek knowledge, he would unseek it. He would not pursue truth. He would unlearn the illusion. He would walk the path of remembering, not by moving forward, but by stepping into what had always been. He stayed within the castle for 13 nights. No one saw him eat, no one heard him speak. He wandered its halls, its tunnels, its gardens, always moving backward, his face to the past, his footsteps falling upon ancient stones as though he knew each one before he stepped. On the 7th night, he descended into the crypt. On the 8th, he stood in the choir. On the 9th, he sat before the obsidian mirror. On the 10th, he vanished from sight. But the Templars say he was not gone. He had begun the inward walk, a deeper pilgrimage into chambers that do not open by key or by time, but only by surrender. By the 12th night, the flames in the hidden chamber burned brighter, their tones deeper. The tree in the garden quivered, though there was no wind. The spiral in the courtyard shimmered with soft light, and those who kept vigil on the battlements reported dreams so vivid they woke weeping. Then, on the 13th night, the pilgrim returned. He emerged from the lowest vault, his robes damp with dew, his hands empty, but his eyes held stillness deeper than any sea. He stood before the gathered brothers, turned slowly, and knelt, not in submission, but in recognition. Then he rose and walked again, backward, out of the fortress, his face toward the setting moon. No one followed. They understood. He was walking home, to where he had never truly left, to where the self remembers what the world forgets. The teachings left behind say that the backward walk is the highest form of pilgrimage, not because it is hard, but because it requires total trust. One cannot see where one steps. One must feel, must remember, must listen to the path as it speaks beneath the feet. It is said that the pilgrim's footsteps remain, not visible, but palpable. Those who walk the halls at night, even now, report moments where their steps fall into perfect rhythm, where the wind seems to shift against the grain, where the pull of time feels reversed. In such moments, one must not fear but follow. Where the pilgrim did not walk backward to escape the world. He walked backward to return to its essence, to the beginning behind the beginning, to the name before the name. And perhaps, if you find yourself someday walking paths you do not know, if your feet move in directions that make no sense, if your dreams are filled with corridors and songs and mirrors that do not reflect, pause. You may be walking the pilgrim's path. You may be remembering, not learning, and in that remembering, the veil thins, and the silence begins to hum. There is a chamber, hidden above, not below, built into the uppermost tower of the Templar fortress, where the wind is sharp and the walls seem to lean inward, listening. It is rarely spoken of in any surviving text, and yet its existence is echoed in the strange asymmetry of the keep's design. While most fortresses crown their highest towers with battlements or bells, this one ends in silence. No roof, no flags, no defense, just a stone-walled room open to the sky, known in hushed tones as the Star Chamber, and within it, suspended from a curved beam of ancient cedar, hangs a bell that never rings. The soundless bell, cast in a metal no longer found in records, dark and unyielding. The bell bears no inscription. Its clapper is intact. Its shape is perfect, but when struck, it emits no sound, at least, not in the way one expects. In 1938, an antiquarian named Claude attempted to record the bell's resonance using the most sensitive instruments of the day. The needle did not move. The recording captured nothing but the assistant present during the test. A quiet woman named Margot later reported that in the moment of the strike, she saw stars, not in the sky, but behind her eyes. It was as if the stars had shifted into me, she wrote in a private letter, as if, just for a moment, I remembered where I came from. What kind of bell rings without sound? The Silent Brotherhood believed the bell was not meant to be heard by ears, but by the soul. That it resonated with what they called the primus tonus, the first tone, the original vibration from which all others came. A tone so pure, so ancient, that it bypassed the senses and went directly into memory. The chamber itself is circular, of course, 12 columns forming a zodiacal ring, each one engraved with a sigil from the Black Book. At the center, directly beneath the open sky, is a mosaic, an 8-pointed star, inlaid with lapis lazuli and pale stone. This star, say those few who have studied it, does not align with any known constellation, and yet, when the moon reaches its zenith during the equinox, Its light falls precisely upon the center point of the star, and the bell shimmers, not with light, but with presence. Witnesses describe a sensation like a wave moving through the body. Breath catches, thoughts fall silent, and for a moment, a long, still, endless moment, there is only being, only now, only remembrance. The bell has no name, but in a Templar scroll hidden within the walls of a priory chapel in Marseille, a single phrase is written, Campana Caeli, the bell of heaven. The text explains little, but beside the phrase is a glyph, the same one found on the inner ring of the Templar compass, representing the 13th point, the one that faces not outward, but upward. And so the theory emerged, that the bell was not a tool of warning or celebration, but of alignment, a bridge between earth and sky, a chord struck not to summon others, but to awaken the one who strikes it. The Silent Brotherhood would climb the tower at twilight, each carrying a small stone marked with their seal. They would place these stones around the mosaic in a precise pattern, 13 stones, 13 points. Then, in total silence, they would stand in a circle, eyes closed, breath stilled. One among them, chosen not by rank but by resonance, would raise a slender rod and strike the bell, and nothing would be heard, but everything would shift. In those moments, the air grew dense, the birds stilled, the stars pulsed more brightly. One witness, a young novice named Emilion, whose journal was found centuries later in the hollow of an oak, described it as follows: "There was no sound, and yet my ribs trembled, my breath ceased. It felt as if I had stepped outside of time, or perhaps deeper into it. I knew not where I stood, only that I had never truly stood there before." Some believe the bell still rings, even now, not always when struck, but when someone below reaches a moment of true stillness, when their breath aligns, their heart softens, their mind surrenders. They say in those moments, something invisible resonates from the tower, a whisper of harmony that travels not through air, but through time. Perhaps you've felt it, a sudden wave of peace while gazing at the stars, a hum in your chest that comes without cause, a memory that arrives without prompting. Perhaps that is the soundless bell, ringing still, not to call us forward, but to call us home, to the place where silence is not empty, but full, where the stars do not burn, they sing. Tucked into the western flank of the fortress, behind a door with no hinges and beneath a lintel engraved only with a single spiral, there lies a chamber shrouded in dust and time. It bears no grand shelves, no neat rows of scrolls or bound tomes. No archivist guards its threshold, and yet, those who have entered speak of the deepest reading they have ever known. They call it the library that reads you. It is not a library in the traditional sense. There are no names on the walls, no titles to browse, no catalogue to consult. The room is small, stone-walled, low-ceilinged. There are 13 niches carved into the perimeter, each no larger than a standing man, each lined with aged wood and faintly shimmering silver thread. In the center stands a low table of cedar wood, smooth from centuries of touch. Upon the table rests a single object, a folio made not of paper, but of something softer, almost like skin. Its cover is blank, its pages are pale. When opened, the script within shifts and shivers like smoke. No two visitors see the same thing, for the book does not reveal stories, it reveals you. The Silent Brotherhood understood memory not as a passive archive, but as a living entity, something that breathes with the soul, expands and contracts with awareness. They believe that in certain conditions, when the breath slows, the silence deepens, and the heart opens, memory reveals its truest form, not a record of what has happened, but a mirror of who one has always been. And that is what this library is. Not a place to learn, a place to remember. A journal left behind by a 17th century mystic named Brother Lucian tells of his night within the library. He had entered seeking knowledge of the order's founding, hoping for history. Instead, he found himself, he wrote. The page turned without touch, and there, written in a script I had never learned, was my mother's laughter, the sound of my childhood steps in the hallway of our house, the scent of rosemary on my father's hands. But then it turned again, and showed me faces I have never met, yet knew. Places I have never stood, yet remembered. Lives, perhaps, that echoed before this one. Another visitor, a mute nun from a Cistercian abbey, emerged from the chamber weeping. When asked what she had seen, she simply placed her hand over her heart and said, "For the first time in her life, I remember." The library is silent, always. But that silence is not stillness, it is movement, like a river beneath the surface. Some say the chamber breathes, that the temperature shifts with thought, that when one's mind wanders, the air thickens, and when one's presence deepens, the walls hum softly and welcome. No one stays more than a night. For the book does not permit excess. When it has revealed what is needed, it closes, and the door, once hidden, opens again. One peculiar trait of the library is its resistance to recording. Photographs blur, transcriptions vanish, even sketches lose their shape after leaving the chamber. It is as if the knowledge within refuses to be taken, insisting instead that it remain, not in ink, but in soul. The Silent Brotherhood saw this library not as a secret, but as a sacrament. To them, the truest wisdom is not acquired, it is awakened. And the library that reads you does not contain history, it contains origin. It remembers what you have forgotten, not through neglect, but through birth, through time, through the long veil of living. So if ever you feel a longing that cannot be named, a nostalgia not for a place, but for a state of being, know this: the pages are already written. They wait not for your eyes, but for your presence. And when you are ready, truly ready, the library will open, not in stone, not in wood, but in you. For you are the book, and the soul remembers every word. There are moments in time that do not end. They exhale, gently, into eternity. And so it was with the temple. Not the stones, nor the walls, nor the citadel of discipline and mystery, but the living essence within, what the Templars called the breath of the temple, the invisible spirit that moved through the silence of the corridors, the harmony of the choir, the flames, the spiral, the seal, and the stars. It is said that on the final night before the fortress was sealed, not by war, but by the sacred hand of withdrawal, the Silent Brotherhood gathered one last time, deep within the central chamber, where all paths converged. There was no panic, no sorrow, only stillness. They had known this moment would come, not in fear, but as fulfillment. Their mission was never to endure in form, but to preserve a frequency, to ensure that the sacred vibration of remembrance, the quiet hum of the soul that knows its own name, would not vanish into the noise of the coming age. They gathered in the garden beneath the stone. They stood among the 13 flames. They walked the labyrinth in reverse, each step a breath into memory. And then they returned to the center, to the star chamber, beneath the open sky. There, each placed a single object on the mosaic floor: a rose, a stone, a thread of gold, a feather, a shard of glass, a drop of oil, a string of prayer beads, a torn piece of parchment, a cup of spring water, a seed, a broken seal, a bell clapper, and a single breath, exhaled, soft and long, into the night air. These were not offerings, they were signatures, a signing off not from a world they abandoned, but from a frequency they had completed. Each object carried not meaning, but resonance. Each embodied a chapter of the temple's knowing. And when the last breath was given, not dramatic, not final, simply released, a hush deeper than silence fell. The wind did not stir, the stars did not move, the flames dimmed, not extinguished, but folded into the walls, and the chamber, that sacred heart of stone and breath, closed, not with iron, not with stone, but with stillness, a closing that only silence could hold. No one knows what became of the last brothers. Some believe they faded into the villages, becoming gardeners, woodworkers, musicians. Some believe they dissolved into light. Others say they sleep still beneath the fortress, not dead, but dreaming. And in some way all are true, because the breath did not end. It expanded, it became the wind that moves across old stones at dusk, the hush between verses in sacred song, the pause before a newborn's first cry. It became the resonance within seekers who do not know what they seek, the ache of those who long for something unnamed. That is the last breath of the temple. It moves still. You feel it when you stand among ruins and your heart beats slower, when you gaze at a flame and forget time, when you read a sentence and feel as though you wrote it lifetimes ago. The temple's walls may have crumbled, but its breath remains. It lives in each act of sacred remembering, in every whisper that rises without sound, in the stillness that calls you inward. It is here, now, as you listen, as your breath slows, as the space around you deepens. You carry it, dreamer. You are the last flame, the final seal, the echo of the sacred breath. Not all who walk the path remain within it. Some are called to return not as initiates, but as vessels. They carry the silence of sacred places into a world that has forgotten how to listen. They speak no doctrine, bear no crest, and yet when they enter a room, the air changes. The world leans in. Stillness follows behind them like a cloak. These are the dreamers who return, and their story begins where most stories end, in awakening. The return of the dreamer is not a moment of triumph, but of softness. It begins with the quiet recognition that what was once sought in vault and stone now lives within breath and shadow. That the spiral walked was not a place, but a remembering that the flame burns not in the chamber, but in the chest. The Silent Brotherhood called this revolutio interioris, the inward revolution. It is said that one such dreamer emerged from the fortress long after it had been sealed, not through corridors or stairwells, but through light. A young girl, they say, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a voice like a half-remembered song. She spoke no words at first. She simply stood upon the edge of the valley, barefoot, her hands open to the sky. She wandered the land in silence, but wherever she went, trees flowered out of season, lost animals returned home, broken clocks began to tick again, and people wept without knowing why. She carried no book, she offered no teaching, and yet those who met her found their dreams deepened, their sleep softened, their questions quieted. She was not sent by the temple, she was the temple. For the dreamer once returned does not point back, they walk forward, and with each step, they carry the sacred resonance into the world's forgotten corners, a breath of remembering in markets, in hospitals, in kitchens, in fields. The sacred need not remain behind stone. The sacred breathes where we allow it. One old tale passed among the wind-haunted peaks of the Languedoc tells of a man who met a traveler on the road. She wore no shoes. Her hair was silver though her face was young. She asked him only one question: "What have you forgotten to remember?" He could not answer, not then, but the question followed him. It echoed. Years passed, his work changed, his family grew, and yet, always that question waited, until one evening, alone by the fire, he heard it not as challenge, but as invitation. And he remembered, not a fact, not an event, he remembered being. It is the gift of the returning dreamer. They do not speak of stars and chambers. They do not explain the mirror, the labyrinth, the flame. They carry it in their presence. They awaken it in others. And in doing so they become the living continuation of a tradition that never needed preservation, only remembrance. For the temple was never stone, it was resonance, it was breath, it was you, and you, dreamer, have returned. You walk the world now, not seeking but glowing, not asking but listening, and where you go, the stars lean closer, the trees pause, the silence gathers, and the sacred remembers itself through you. The path winds gently now, not upward or downward, but inward, curling like smoke, like a dream, like the spiral etched into the courtyard stone so many lifetimes ago. We have walked with knights and stargazers, sung with choirs of silence, knelt before flames that remember us, and stood before mirrors that do not reflect but reveal. And now, at last, we arrive at the center, not to end the journey, but to remember that it never truly began. The circle without end is not a place, nor a moment in time. It is a state of being, a gentle return to the breath before breath, to the thought before language, to the gaze before sight. It is the space where the self no longer seeks, but simply is. The Silent Brotherhood spoke often of the circle. To them, it was more than symbol. It was origin, completion, a prayer without sound, a sentence without period. One ancient Templar manuscript, so faded it can only be read under moonlight, begins with a single sentence. In the center of the circle stands no one. This was not a metaphor, it was a revelation. For, in the circle, the true circle, all points are equal. There is no hierarchy, no higher, no lower, only presence. Only the shared rhythm of stillness unfolding itself endlessly. The inner teachings of the Brotherhood held that every sacred structure, every song, every step within the labyrinth, was but an expression of this truth, that all things return to their source, that life, memory, longing, and even forgetting, are all movements along the same path. The Templars did not guard treasure, they guarded the circle. They walked it with reverence, not to reach its center, but to remember that they had never truly left. And now, you have walked it too. You have touched the crypt and the flame, the mirror and the rose, the bell and the vault. You have met the dreamer within the dream. You have stood beside the pilgrim and knelt with the choir, and in doing so, you have not learned, you have remembered, because the temple, in truth, was never built, it was felt, it was sung, it was carried, in the breath, in the gaze, in the soft spaces between heartbeat and thought. The circle without end lives not in stone, but in soul. And now, as the dream begins to dissolve, as your body softens into rest, know this: you are within the circle. You always were. You are not outside the mystery, peering in. You are the mystery. You are the chamber. You are the seal. You are the 13th flame, burning softly in the quiet night. And though the fortress may fade into fog, and the stars above dim, in the pages of this sacred remembering close, the circle continues. It does not need your belief. only your stillness. So rest now, dreamer. Let the breath of the temple curl around you like smoke from an ancient censer. Let your bones remember the song beneath silence. Let your soul spiral gently into the heart of the undying rose, and when morning comes, you will rise not with answers but with reverence, and the circle will walk with you, wherever you go, forever. As our journey through the mystery of the Templar fortress draws to a close, let these ancient whispers settle into your consciousness like morning mist over forgotten stone. We have wandered together through shadowed halls and hidden gardens, followed spiral paths beneath the earth and climbed towards stars that no longer shine, and yet remain. We have listened for bells that ring without sound, for books that read the soul, for voices not of the past, but of the eternal present. The secrets we've explored tonight are not meant to be solved, but to be felt, held gently, like a candle in the dark, flickering not with certainty, but with reverence. This story, this journey, was never about uncovering a hidden vault or finding a lost relic. It was about remembering that the sacred still lingers, in breath, in silence, in the space between heartbeat and dream. If tonight's journey has brought you peace, consider becoming a regular traveler on these mystical paths. Subscribe to join our circle of dreamers, and let the gentle chime of new stories guide you to fresh mysteries each week. Your presence here sustains this quiet fire of contemplation. Tell us, dear dreamer, how did this tale move within you? What part of this forgotten temple stirred your spirit? And from what corner of the world did you join us, as the stars watched quietly overhead? For we are not alone in this stillness. We are a circle, a constellation of quiet hearts, breathing in rhythm with ancient truths. And until we meet again in the realm of dreams and whispers, may your rest be filled with the peaceful echoes of memory, of songs you've never learned yet somehow know, of places you've never seen yet ache to return to, of names spoken not aloud, but gently, within. Sleep well, dreamer, the temple is within you now. Let the silence guide you home.